Good morning. Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Tsai-Ying Lu will defend the academic thesis Carbon Continuity, explaining the changing energy mix of Taiwan's power system after the Second World War. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Okay, dear Proctor and committee members, today I will briefly introduce my dissertation, Carbon Continuity, with you. And do not worry about this blurry background right now. I will come back to explain this later. So allow me to quickly show you the current energy mix of Taiwan's power system first. Taiwan's power system is operated by a state-owned utility named TPC, and from this map of the TPC system distribution, you can notice how Taiwan's power plants with diverse sources at different scales are interconnected through a grid network stretching into the major load centers at the northern center and also the southern poles. Among all these energy sources, Taiwan mainly relies on firing fossil fuels, of which natural gas and coal still claimed about 78% of the total electricity generation in 2023. Even though Taiwan has committed itself to increasing the share of renewables in order to reach its net zero goal by 2050, phasing out fossil fuels remains a challenge, and this is also true for many other countries as well, because energy transitions do not mean a one-time changeover, nor only in terms of the changing numbers of the energy portfolio, but a systemic transformation of the power system. It's supporting infrastructure as well, and also the market rule and its users' behaviors will also need to be transformed. In retrospect, Taiwan has in fact experienced a major transition from a hydro to thermal power-based system ever since the 1960s. And my dissertation proposes that we can better understand the structural limits of Taiwan's current renewable transitions by tracing the historical formation of this carbon continuity through examining how the power systems evolved and adapted itself to many critical challenges, as these text in the blue square shows, by deploying different energy resources into its system. So let us take a further look into what happened in the 1950s and 60s. So you can see a shift occurred in 1962 when the power generation by thermal power exceeded hydro for the first time, meaning the changing role of hydropower plants in the TPC system from supporting 24/7 hours need to only peak hours instead. But these figures can only show us the result instead of the triggers behind this shift. So how then can we understand these reasons behind the shift? My dissertation provides a long-range perspective to examining how specific energy choice was based on a particular region and how these visions were discussed, argued, and decided among system planners. Second, I emphasize the fact that harnessing energy resources will require other supporting infrastructure and also actors across different sectors, for example, the power sector, industrial sector, and transportation sector. The shared attribute among these infrasystems is that once they are settled in place, it is usually very costly to alter or replace them or find other alternatives, so it will generate a structural limitation which results in a pattern of carbon energy usage for a long time. So in order to recognize how Taiwan's carbon continuity grew from a tendency to a system inertia, these are the traces that I found that we can follow to recognize these shift. So the first one is through the historical agents. For example, from this photo shows, these are the engineers held different opinions because based on their different training backgrounds. and argued what constitutes the Taiwan's optimal energy mix over time. And we can also trace this from the materialities, which is the characteristics of energy carriers that had limited their ways to be harnessed, transported, or stored, and thus hold the impact on the planner's preferences and the development logic. And we can also observe from the unexpected events which might cause the plans on hold or proceed. And finally, we can also from the influence of Taiwan's energy politics, which result in a developmental pattern. And if we overlook these traces, I think we might have misunderstandings regarding Taiwan's past energy decisions and also the current energy debates. For example, I point out that the fact Taiwan's carbon dependency started to emerge in the 1950s instead of 60s when installing coal-fired units characterized by its rather fast installed and also cheap with the help of US aid, and it is also not geographically bounded, seemed more feasible to the nationalist government in the early post-war years when the industrial power need started to surge. Firing domestic coal, especially to support the growing demand for industrial power in Keelung and Kaohsiung, which are cities located in the northeast and southeast poles, was considered the solution. However, Taiwan's domestic coal was mostly reserved in the northern area, and it soon became very difficult to TPC engineers to manage the delivery time and also the quality of domestic coal transported from the northeast to the southeast industrial port city. This is partly because the nationalist government used TBC as the guarantee buyer for domestic coal to control the market price at the time. There are even times when TBC engineers would lament that only poor quality coal was dumped into their hands. And in addition to the quality issue, TBC engineers had to negotiate with another state agency, the Taiwan Railway Administration, to request sufficient and on-time delivery of coals by coordinating their coal harbor cars. So you can see from this figure, there are supposed 15 cars to unload coals at Kaohsiung, and the dashes suggest the route of empty cars return to the north. So this domestic coal problem remained unsolved even till the early 1960s. So TBC engineers began considering the possibility of importing fuel oil through waterways. As the Kaohsiung port was undergoing its extension project in accordance with Taiwan's burgeoning petrochemical industry around the same time, TBC built the Daling thermal power plant alongside the China Petroleum Company's newly built oil refinery at the Kaohsiung port. And the Daling plant encompassed the then largest scale power units rated at 500 megawatts per unit, firing fuel oil and coal interchangeably. By 1968, such interconnected infosystem between power system and also its fuel oil system symbolizes the beginning of Taiwan's dependency on imported hydrocarbons. And TBC's development logic of baseload expanding, load following, and its focus on fuel flexibility within the system was also fixating. While many claim that Taiwan turned to imported oil because of the limited reserves of domestic coal, which in other words, it was about the concerns of the scarcity issue of coal, what I introduced here was that how TBC engineers were actually managing the accessibility and also the quality of domestic coal, and how they did it by forming the carbon-intensive infosystem among its system, power system, and its fuel system, and its major industrial users through power lines. So such a tendency toward a scaling up of its carbon dependency in the 1960s extends even when the oil and diplomatic crisis hit Taiwan in the 1970s. While TBC expected its growing reliance on imported fuel oil and coal, the nationalist government's ruling legitimacy was seriously challenged by the PRC, and so they lost a great deal of diplomatic ties with many countries in the 70s. After the first oil crisis, to keep in order to keep the fuel flowing, the government had to grant TPC more agency. That says it allowed TPC to conduct fuel procurement to ensure both stable oil and coal imports, and also a friendly relationship with other countries. In the case of oil, as you see from this picture, this is the Al Baha project, which was then the TPC's biggest international technical assistance program. 270 engineers were sent to the site in Saudi Arabia to build a power plant, transmission, and distribution lines in exchange for Saudi Arabia's oil export and also its recognition of Free China. Coal was another strategic material as well. For instance, TPC bought in American coal even at a higher price with the government's approval for its possible diplomatic merits. Meanwhile, TPC further extended to the mining and transshipping business, not only for coal but also for uranium mining through international cooperation. For example, in Canada, TPC co-invests in Danson Resources Limited with transnational companies to exploit the coal deposit in Coalspur, Alberta in 1981. The same is the case for uranium. Since uranium was rendered a high-profile strategic material at the time, the exporting countries would only consent to deals on the condition of a bilateral agreement, which requires smooth diplomatic relations between two participant countries. So the TPC had to rely on a different approach, on its connections with overseas utility and institutions to get the required nuclear materials and techniques. For example, TPC established ties with the Korean power engineering company, shortened as KOPAC, at the time, and together TPC, KOPAC, and American company, they cooperated through a joint venture in uranium mining, which is the Oviedo project in Paraguay between 1976 and 1983. However, unlike KOPAC, Taiwan's chance of setting up the uranium processing chain waned in the following decade. And what does the role of nuclear play in Taiwan's carbon-intensive infrasystems? Instead of seeing nuclear units joining as a strategy under energy diversification, my dissertation argued that Taiwan's nuclear power was, in fact, co-evolved with the carbon-intensive infrasystem. Instead of bringing too many changes to TPC's development logic, because nuclear power plants, it is also a baseload power plant operating 24/7. And in case of its possible malfunctions, it means that TPC had to install extra thermal power units, which are mainly fast-starting gas turbines, just in case. In turn, from this infrasystems perspective, integrating nuclear units has been a part of Taiwan's carbon continuity. From the 70s to 80s, Taiwan's carbon infrasystems stretched from certain Kaohsiung Port City across regions along with external effects and also environmental hazards. As the nationalist government's authoritarian region was getting loose in the 80s, TPC found its ideal power scenario was seriously doubted and challenged by the public, especially by the just established major opposing political party, the DPP. This picture shows here is the protest against TPC's plan to build its fourth nuclear power plant and also another coal-fired power plant in Yilan County to meet the power demand from the northern load center. Here is another clip from a magazine article titled, "Is TPC's president being honest?" The politicians held doubt not only about nuclear safety at the time, but also about the necessity of building so many power plants when the electricity demand went down due to the second oil crisis in 1979. Ever since then, Taiwan's energy debates have become highly politicized in terms of the power struggles between the two major political parties and often involved non-human actors as the reasons or the last straw for possible compromises. For instance, in the case of anti-Sual thermal power plants in my dissertation, it was the pursuit of protecting the habitat of migratory bird, which could be potentially destroyed by the power plants of the thermal power plant. And this is the last straw that forced TPC to step down and to withdraw its proposal. Furthermore, in the face of public pressure, TPC was forced to terminate its plans for oversee mining business abroad and hold its construction of more coal yards, thermal power plants, and its 4 nuclear power plants. Under these circumstances, in order to keep its system momentum growing, even with the growing public protests, TPC pushed Taiwan's electricity market deregulation in the early 1990s, allowing those intensive power users to install coal generation units and join the electricity market as independent power producers to support their own electricity needs. In other words, Taiwan's carbon-intensive infrastructure kept expanding even under such circumstances through the strengthening of TPC's relationship with its industrial power users. In short, by tracing how Taiwan's carbon dependency through a long-range perspective and the idea of infosystems, we saw how it began to emerge in the 50s and kept growing to the 2000s with TPC's agency changing accordingly. Therefore, renewables development in Taiwan remained marginal in the system till the 2000s and was integrated into the carbon-intensive infosystem even when its scale increased. So let us come back to this map again. It is a part of the distribution map of all the coal mines in Keelung, which this map was drawn by a coal miner who spent almost all his lifetime in the mine. The red lines suggest the railways, and the blue ones are rivers that carry coal from all disparate mines to the Keelung port for export, or all the way down to the southern Taiwan. I want to use this map as my final remark and reminder. When we consider certain energy choices or shift, it is also about the way we harness, transport, and store it, and it is never easy to shift from one to one without systematic transformation of all these infrasystems. Thank you. I'll stop here and will send back the floor to Director. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. The opposition will now be opened by Professor Hommels. She holds a chair in Socio-Historical Technology Studies at our Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidates, dear Tsai-Ying, I would like to start by congratulating you on your dissertation. I found it a very interesting and well-researched piece of work. And in particular, what I found very strong about your thesis is the way it positions itself in relation to the existing historiography of the Taiwanese energy sector. It shows a number of times in your dissertation how the analysis of this dissertation adds a new perspective, nuance or difference to existing historical studies of the energy transitions in Taiwan. It also deals with a topic of great societal and academic importance, and your work contributes to a better historical understanding of the energy transition and the way we have become and also stay dependent on carbon-based systems. And my question is related to that last aspect. Your title is Carbon Continuity, so our continued dependence on the carbon-based systems. And it also relates to the role of theory in your dissertation. So in your presentation, you very nicely explained how you use the term infrasystems in your analysis, and that allows you to show how Taiwan's energy mix is related to other infrastructures like storage, transportation, and the chemical industry. And also other industrial sectors and technological systems than the carbon-based ones contributed to the energy systems lock-in. You explained that very well, and also its path dependence and obduracy. For example, in Chapter 4, you argue that the renewable energy system evolved within the entrenched carbon-intensive network rather than initiating a total changeover. And in Chapter 5, you claim that LNG, liquid natural gas, in fact increased the path dependency of carbon-intensive infrasystems. So the dynamics that you identified in your dissertation see mainly system adaptation and also integration, and you also mentioned the term co-evolution, without really affecting the obduracy of the carbon-based system, let alone undoing it. So this raised a number of questions with me, and I have 3 of them, and I will read them very slowly so you can take note. So first of all, I would like to ask you whether you can unpack the notions of obduracy and path dependency and the way you use them in your thesis a little bit more for me. You mention them, but you don't really elaborate on them. Second, what do you see as the main mechanisms and dynamics of path dependency and obduracy in Taiwan's energy system? The main mechanisms that you see. I mentioned already a few, and yeah, maybe you want to confirm or say something different about it. And the third, that's a question about the future. So what do you see as the main implications of the dynamics of system integration and adaptation for the future development and integration of renewable energy within and maybe also beyond an entrenched carbon-intensive network? Thank you.
Okay. Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your very interesting questions. I'll try to answer one-to-one. So first, about the theoretical concept that I used and I borrowed from your idea of obduracy and how I see it might be adapted to my theory about Taiwan's energy transitions over time. I think I really like the way that the obduracy concept theorizes how not just about how the infrastructure might expand it, it's a certain way, a pattern that continue just like this in a very long range perspective of time. But you also mentioned about the institutional routine, that how they think of, how these infrastructure should be and how these kind of ideas and visions proceed even with multiple challenges over time. And I think I used that concept in my dissertations as well, but I reframe it as I wanted to put it more about the coordination between different systems, different inferred systems, and to name it as a system inertia that would keep certain kind of visions about Taiwan's energy futures and about Taiwan's energy infrastructure or how they should be in the long term. So that would be my major appropriation from your idea. And also the second question about Taiwan's main mechanism behind this dependency. I think I just explained this in my this presentation before. So I saw it from majorly the materiality of the energy carriers significantly play the role in influencing TBC engineers' ways of harnessing and also how to deploying it in its instances. And that caused, especially from imported oil, that will cause an inertia for them to alter, for example, the pipeline system to actually turn it to maybe, in this carbon net zero free new future, there should not be any more pipelines underneath the Kaohsiung city. But that would be very difficult because of the sunk cost of the infrastructure and also the way how oil will be harnessed and consumed in Taiwan. So that's, I think, materiality is one, and also TBC agency, how they can actually decided the system to look like and changes over time as its organizational characteristic. I think that would also form a certain pattern of their decision. And the third one, I think it would be the infosystem perspective and also about the energy politics in Taiwan that would also became one of the mechanisms behind every energy decisions in Taiwan. And the third question about the futures, I actually plan for a short answer for that. Just let me find this in terms of the future. Yes. So in terms of energy geopolitics, one might say that the contemporary energy transition often, offers a glimpse of the new geopolitics geopolitical future, which is not based on strategic oil or coal, hydrocarbon resources, but on distributed renewable energy that might increase energy security for many countries, right? Yet Taiwan's case, I think, like wind development in my dissertation, clearly shows how it only works when it was integrated into the carbon-intensive infrastructure, into its grid, and how offshore wind was granted so many attention because of it could help sustain the status quo of the power consumption landscape and the growth of the new energy-intensive user. Now it's the semiconductor industry and also the AI computing center. So this is also true on global scale. Countries with rich hydrocarbon resources are now investing in hydrogen production using their existing natural gas facilities. So from my viewpoint, I think the vast sunk cost of carbon infrastructure might shape the energy geopolitics of the next generation instead of the other way around. Yeah, that's all my answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Professor Dr. Wen-Ling Tu, online, National Chengxi University in Taiwan.
Sorry, the phone call just interrupted. Hi, that's Tsai-Ying and everyone. And I also like to congratulate for Tsai-Ying's very good and exciting work. And I think the dissertation provides a complex landscape of energy transition in Taiwan, especially I think through, through historical lens. And I think also shed a light of multi-phase involvement of stakeholders ranging from statesmen and bureaucrats to engineers, transnational consultants, NGOs, politicians, and even like non-human actors across different stages of energy policy formulation. So I like the infra system Tsai-Ying just presented. Here we see the the historical agents, materials, contingencies, and especially you just mentioned about the kind of the diplomatic purpose that keep the fuel flowing and increasing oil dependence in the landscape of 1980s. Yes, it's at that time it's a kind of the geopolitical landscape. So I think it provides, like some kind of explanation that we probably, kind of neglect, in the past, and also provide, like some, that perspective, for the kind of the future, how to solve the hydrocarbon dependent structure. And toward the kind of the energy transition, especially there are so much kind of imported energy sources for Taiwan. So so I think it's all like good thing, and I hope and I heard the committee, the opponents are going to ask you a lot of questions. But I think my question is kind of will be very simple, because I already wrote in my written documents, especially about the electricity price, because that in your dissertation you didn't discuss that much. And I feel that that in the past that you already raised the important kind of geopolitics factor, that's also one of our kind of Taiwan's policy toward the energy choice. But electricity price, certainly is also very important, like policy, to decide, which energy, can be put on the kind of agenda. And I feel that because this issue seems not, really fit into your infrastructure framework. So I'm just wondering, like how will you, discuss this kind of important factor in your, the current framework, and also, kind of inspiration for the future study. So just, wondering if how will you see their impact on a broader landscape of energy transition in Taiwan? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, dear highly esteemed opponent. Sure, the Taiwanese government subsidized the renewable sector, energy sector, by ensuring a higher procurement rate of green electricity, which has been one of the reasons for Taiwan's fast-growing installed solar capacity, and also for the recent offshore wind power units. It is perhaps also worth noting that, on the other hand, Taiwan's relatively lower price of electricity generated by conventional units also became the opponent's major reason to doubt the government's renewable policy goal. And of course, the lower electricity price does not reflect on their actual operating costs, like fuel costs or the social costs. For example, the siting of Taiwan's nuclear waste disposal is not included in the calculation when it comes to the cost of nuclear power units. So this is because the government has long controlled the lower price is because the government has long controlled Taiwan's electricity prices, promising the low electricity rates despite any economic, social, political changes has been the key to sustaining a ruling power's legitimacy in Taiwan. So this has resulted in TPC's heavy financial burden, especially in recent years of the ongoing warfare in Ukraine, which perhaps also ring true in South Korea regarding the relatively politically decided electricity rates as well. So I think that's the kind of mechanism of electricity price that would make the differences in Taiwan's energy policy.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Professor Dr. Wiebe Beiker, Emeritus Chair, Technology and Society, also at FASOS.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first also my congratulations. I think it's an excellently written dissertation. I really enjoyed reading it. And on top of that, a brilliant cover picture. You must be a very good designer or have a very good designer friend. But let me focus on my question. The purpose of your study is, and I quote, is to present a dynamic picture of the decision-making process involving various actors in Taiwan energy history. And you do that, and I quote again, by particularly focusing on TPC engineers' role in handling tensions surrounding the exploitation of hydrocarbon fuels and the configuration of socio-technical systems. And you gave us a summary of how you do that. And quite understandably, you then use, well, one of the theoretical frameworks you use is TOMUS, large technological systems. And one concept there is the system builder. And then you say, very briefly, between brackets, and in this case, the system builder is TPC.
Yes.
Which sounds remarkable that such a large corporation with such a big history, so many engineers, scientists, and other people around, could actually speak with only one voice. So my question is it really such a monolithic, completely without any internal discussions existing corporation? Well, then I would like to learn about that because we can use a bit less controversy here. Or maybe are there some internal conversations? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. Okay. Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. I think one of the major things I mentioned in chapter 2 is about internally, TPC engineer community should be seen as a very heterogeneous community instead of a very, only monolithic voices among them, because they were coming from different training backgrounds. So people come from civil engineering and also hydraulics. They would emphasize the role of hydropower plants should be and how they should be harnessed more in Taiwan's optimal energy mix in the 1950s. But and then the thermal power sector, the engineers that received the training from the American companies that will say, okay, now the thermal power units should be the trend, the major trend, and how the coordination between thermal power units and the hydropower units should be the major discussion at the time. Instead of, so they were kind of like arguing with each other what kind of energy mix should be the Taiwan's, the ideal one. So that's the first thing I would like to stress. And externally, of course, they are not just about TPC's opinions that would matter the most, because within the government agencies, you see how it actually have to, negotiate with the TRA, the Taiwan Railway Administrations, about how much coal they should get and how much coal other like cement industry should get. So they have to argue with them and to provide them like the power demand from its intensive users, so that, okay, so this year we will need from like January to March, then we will need how much amount of domestic coal at the time, so you have to deliver us. But they will say, oh, but the last time you didn't give us that kind of amount. So they were arguing either in the internal community or in the intergovernmental governmental agencies. So I wouldn't say that. I hope my dissertation has shown it's a rather dynamic picture of energy decision making instead of.
Okay, well, in some sense that's a relief. Then Taiwanese engineers are a bit more similar to the engineers that I know.
Yes.
But still, why? I mean, have I missed that you then perhaps characterized certain sort of subgroups within TPC, thought styles? I mean, I read about, I think I can remember only 2 individual engineers being mentioned. Chu Xing,
yes,
being characterized as an electrical engineer trained in the US, but also Ye Xuan, but a fluid engineer. I mean, those are very different ways of looking at the world. I mean, can you characterize, or did you characterize, and I missed it, certain subgroups or thought styles within TPC looking at the various dilemmas they had?
I try with my limited materials at hand to try to to find their articles in the in-house TPC in-house journal to see how these different engineers actually arguing about and what's their mindset. And I try to framework in them as one time there was like this kind of operating logic or say designing logic of TPCs that they only focus on one power plant. So it's one power plant design. So they could argue it's rather hydropower base should be the base load power, or the thermal power base should be the base model. So that would see it as a single system designing logic. But after the 1960s, when the TVA model comes in Taiwan, the coordination between different energies became the major trend among engineers in Taiwan and also in other countries at the time in Southeast Asia, especially because that's the time when TVA model went in, right? So I characterize them as when it turns from a single power logic, single power plant logic to the coordination between different power plants, and that they started to argue, okay, so how the percentage and how these power, like hydropower plants, should use as peak load one to support peak load instead of like a base load power plant. So the roles are changing among these discussions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Hyung-Soo Choi, Professor of History of Science and Technology at Seoul National University of Science and Technology.
Okay, thank you very much. I like to begin by mentioning that following the other examiners, that this is a major accomplishment to be able to draw a picture of energy history for such a long period of time in Taiwan. So thank you very much for working on this. I guess my question is about your title, right? Because any argument for continuity is inherently a matter of interpretation, because reality is infinitely complex, and you can always find aspects of discontinuity if you like to, right? So it falls to the scholar to paint a convincing picture of continuity, if you would like to argue that. So the high-level question that I have is, so why is continuity important for you in telling this story? So in other words, what convinced you to argue that continuity is a better way to understand and comprehend this subject? And I was struck as I was reading through the dissertation, that, for example, on page 64 or page 95, you have these wonderful graphs, which you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, about the shifting statistics of energy mix during the time period that you are dealing with. So I was hoping that in answering the question that I've just asked, you can use those graphs to kind of identify and help us read these graphs better by identifying some of the research questions that you have throughout this dissertation, and hopefully enlighten us about how to understand these graphs better, basically. Thank you.
Dear esteemed opponents, thank you for your question. So these are two very difficult questions to answer. The first one, about the high-level one, why use continuity as a concept to better understand Taiwan's energy transitions over time? I think from the graphs, which I was trying to use the graphs to convince you, because in the graph you see how Taiwan's carbon dependency, also dependency on imported hydrocarbons, that's so significant that would held like the implications to the current renewable transition policy in Taiwan. And I think mostly when you see the case study that I deliberated in chapter 5, it's a relatively recent event, and I felt that the major argument should not be about whether it is green electricity better or the carbon one better. It should be like, or it's about how it is the rivalry relationship between brown economy and also the environment, how these versus relationship. I think the debate should be how we develop new energy technologies and also toward a certain energy vision or the future by slowly transition the hydrocarbon emphasis and also their structural limits that exerted in Taiwan till now. So I try to use carbon continuity and try to find its historical formation from the beginning. So that will be in the 1950s when the engineers' mindset started to shift to domestic coal. I will say it's a slowly emerging sign of Taiwan's carbon continuity. And and regarding the graph, if you see from, I don't know if I can go back to the graph. Okay. Yeah, so this one is it's only 1950s to 1960, right? But if we saw this, like I said, you will only see the results of the crossing in 1962. Like, okay, so now we saw the thermal power, electricity generation by thermal power actually exceed in 1962. But we have to saw how long the construction will need before it actually exceeds hydropower's electricity generation. So I hope my dissertation could offer some more context behind in this graph, so that we can better know what's the mindset behind all these different energy deployment at the time. So, and I think one of my major argument would be how their mindset and their logic also extended to current energy policy decision as well. I think that will be, the answers I have right now. Thank you.
Just a short follow-up. So, is that? I mean, the interpretation that carbon-based energy had continued for an elongated period of time in Taiwan, is that something that you find surprising? I guess is the key.
Okay. Well, then I feel surprising when I saw the information or the materials in the 1970s when the oil crisis hit, because all our conventional explanations regarding Taiwan's react to the first or the second oil crisis would be the decrease of oil deployment, or the highlights of how TPC tried to use the energy diversification as the major strategy to tackle the oil crisis, right? But as my studies growth, I think I found how the idea of energy diversification, it was actually rooted, had already happened in the 1950s and 60s when they considered to use fuel oil and coal interchangeably, use this fuel flexibility as a way to decrease the risk when it comes to some, like the coal, probably the not delivery on time call that would happen, so that this kind of concept had already existed in the 1950s or the 60s. And we also saw from the graphs in my dissertation shows how Taiwan's oil dependency still increased and still extended to the 80s after the two oil crises. So I think I found this very surprising. So that's why I wanted to use this concept to further and to explain Taiwan's energy transitions over time.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Brigitte Lenormand, Associate Professor of Global and Transnational European History, also at FASUS.
Thank you, Madam Rector. I would like to begin by commending you for a rich and nuanced investigation into the evolution of Taiwan's energy mix, which I think makes a significant contribution both to Taiwanese historiography and to the historiography of energy transitions. In terms of the contributions, I'd like to highlight that you did an excellent job exploring the complex interactions of different actors and factors and trying out a broader trajectory, which represents, I think, a lot of sophisticated work. My question to you is to sort of zoom out from the specific Taiwanese case and situate it in a global context. And so in your book, at various moments, you point out that this is a Taiwanese story, although it does have these global interactions. But can the drivers of the changing energy mix apply to other countries at the same time? And so in a sense, I'm asking you to situate this into global trends, which is particularly interesting as you have adopted such a large time frame. And I think you've already answered this with respect to the current moment in relation to political mobilization around the environment and also the advantages of a flexible energy system. But can you also maybe comment on the earlier time periods? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, esteemed opponents. The earlier time periods, meaning the Japanese colonial period. I think in my dissertation in chapter 1, in the introduction, I mentioned about how Taiwan's energy system was actually inherited some Japanese colonial legacy in terms of infrastructure-wise, because in the Japanese colonial ruling time, Taiwan experienced a modernization in terms of urbanization and also like major infrastructure like roads, railways, and also its more modern techniques to coal mining, in terms of coal mining, also introduced to Taiwan in that period. And I think TPC system was gradually integrated into one centralized system during the Japanese period, because then the Japanese southern forward policy in 1930s had triggered Taiwan's the construction of the major Sun Lake hydropower plants in the central Taiwan, so that they can utilize those electricity to support the industrial port city Kaohsiung and to build like its oil refinery plants in Kaohsiung and to support its military needs to exploit the resources, the raw materials in the Southeast Asia. And Taiwan became a very important strategic hold between Japan and also Southeast Asia. So Taiwan's power system also started to emerge in centralized power system started to emerge in that time because of this kind of historical context. So I will say that this infrastructural base that inherited from the Japanese ruling period was in fact very important in Taiwan. And also after the Second World War, the nationalist government, like these engineers, they would say, okay, now we'll have the sinification of engineers that we don't want to use the Japanese style or say, oh, the Japanese style infrastructure was less like modern than like this one. Like, so I think these actually held some actual implication even after the Second World War. So yeah, that would be my comment to the earliest historical period in terms of Taiwan's power system.
If I may just follow up, I think you've provided an excellent example of global linkages through colonialism. I was wondering if you could also talk about global trends. So for example, if we think of the oil crisis, is what happened in Taiwan potentially comparable to what happens elsewhere in the world? Yeah.
Okay. I think especially in the case of oil crisis, if I may, the first oil crisis in 1973, actually the countries in Taiwan or in the Southeast Asia and also in India, recently there's another paper talking about, the actual impacts of oil crisis in India in 1973, all stated that actually the problem of the time is inflation. And also the food problem. So this kind of context actually will pose some challenges to their legitimacy, the government's legitimacy. So they will exert it, they will like in Taiwan, the Taiwanese government started to build more infrastructure, use this kind of project to show these are under control, and also we can, to still modernize even when we kind of hit by both the oil crisis and also the diplomatic crisis in the 70s. So I think such a global trend or global context over time that will make Taiwan's energy history not just about Taiwan. It is also about the global energy history, not in the 1970s or the time even earlier. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Mila Davis, Assistant Professor Business History and History of Technology at Eindhoven University of Technology, also online. Where is she?
Thank you, co-rector. First of all, I want to congratulate you with your work and to express my compliments. It's really interesting and also very clearly written dissertation. I think you convincingly illustrate how a long-term perspective enriches the current limited picture of Taiwan's energy transition. So the many nuanced perspectives and layered analysis linking various developments make it a very fruitful scholarly work. So let's come to my question. You mentioned that you use the term, I quote you, energy futures to describe the varied conceptions and expectations from a specific energy mix. Energy futures links to the socio-technical imaginaries initially coined by Jasanoff and Kim. And you summarize how Yang Ji-Yuan, I don't know if I pronounced it well, used the socio-technical imaginary as a conceptual framework to elaborate the threefold storylines of renewables in Taiwan. But I wonder in what way your conceptualization and approach is influenced by, differs from the socio-technical imaginaries approach? And finally, what would your contribution to socio-technical imaginary studies be?
Okay, esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. I will need to take a moment to think about this. Okay, so I did use, I like the idea of socio-technical imaginary, so I saw this really can beautifully frame how energy visions were actually visions. So, and how that might vary, time after time, and also from different perspectives, literally from different engineers. So I think in my studies, I didn't use the actual phrase of socio-technical imaginaries, but I use energy futures because I wanted this kind of concept is more broadly, and it could integrate the idea of infrasystem as well. I wanted to make it a more synthesized idea about all these imagined things should happen in the future, both infrastructure-wise and also both the different energy region, like based on their calculation or forecast. So that's still not answered about why I don't use that social technical, right? Because that's also social imaginaries, also technical imaginaries. So I think I would like to use infrasystem because it's a more cross-stack sectors, and it will take a long-range perspective in terms of this. So I try to not try to use the idea of energy futures to be able to explain both these different time and different season transitions and under different regions, so that it would be like a broader conceptual network framework in terms of social-technical imaginaries. Yeah, that's my answer for now. But yeah, I can discuss with you later if you want.
Okay. One follow-up question. So when you would rewrite your colleagues' work from your perspective, so your futures, broadening, more looking at a broader, different, combining different infrastructures, more long-term perspective, what would be then the difference? What would be the other outcome when you look at the renewables in Taiwan? Would you also come to the three storylines or different storylines, or what would be then the difference?
Let me just cite the studies from Yang Ziyuan. I think he actually used the idea of socio-technical imaginaries to say the three kind of storylines based on different imaginaries toward renewable energies, from like the local community, and also one from the government feed-in tariff committee, and how they think the electricity price should be decided. But I think I will rewrite, if I can, his study about, I won't say this is three different streams of stories. They will be related in terms of infrasystem, if you will. You will see this is a different, how the system adapted itself to renewable energy development, instead of saying, okay, this is a very new things we need to take it out and to examining this independently. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Tsai-Ying Lu, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room. All right, please.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Tsai-Ying Lu, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and of your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Modi is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Good. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Tsai-Ying Lu, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Well, Tsai, congratulations. This is a very special day for you, for me, and for Vincent. I think most of all, it's a very special day for our little trio, which has been really a great joy to be part of for all these years. Yeah, I think from the first instant, the three of us had a wonderful click, and really we learned, I hope, a lot from each other. I know Vincent and I learned an enormous amount from you about Taiwan, about energy systems, about energy transitions. So we are very grateful for that. I hope that you didn't mind that all of our enthusiastic questions as historians pulled you further and further back into the past, but you certainly rose to the challenge, and we were always incredibly impressed by the sources that you found and the way that you were able to weave them all together to solve the research puzzle behind this dissertation. Let me just say, you are a very complicated and independent personality, and I think that very much matches the complexity of the topic that you took on. You wove together all of these different sources, all of these different actors, these different sectors of Taiwanese society, and over this incredible range of history to show all of the ways in which energy transitions, technological transitions, political transitions, cultural transitions are never simple from 1 to 0 transitions, but instead are these profoundly complex social dynamics in which there are all kinds of continuities and in which the past is never just the past, but is always with us. I hope that on a personal level that will also be true for you. You have made a transition to a new job, a new life, but I very much hope that, yes, there will be some carbon continuity in terms of your time at Maastricht that will carry with you in your new life. I turn it over to Vincent as well.
And a good thing we didn't match our speeches, so I can probably skip half of it. I'm very proud. I think we're very proud to stand in front of you, but I hope you are very proud, because we've been cheerleading along the way. You've been carrying all the work, and I cannot emphasize that enough. So congratulations, Tsai-Ying. I think the process itself is very much a story of transitions and continuities. I think the way things are run at FASOS are distinct and different from other places anyway, but for someone coming from Taiwan, this is a major transition, and you adjust it. I think the way we supervise is maybe also a little bit different than most people are used to. Maybe that's mostly on me. but you also adjusted to that and really make that work. And I think what I'm very happy about is that you allowed us to supervise you, not just the thesis, but also you. And we've really seen you grown as a scholar throughout the years, and that really rings through in the thesis and the density and the depth that you've explored. We quite often after the supervision session sat just for a couple of minutes together, always amazed, new rabbit holes, new sets of literature that you dove into, but you always came up again and made it work, and made it work in the thesis, and also was able to draw this into a narrative. So very, very impressive, and thank you for coping with us as supervisors. Cyrus already strengthened that this is a two-way learning process. We also learned a lot from your perspectives on these matters. Of course, there's many similarities with other places in energy transitions elsewhere, but also many distinctive features. And of course, we learned a lot about the entangled processes of energy, geopolitics, domestic politics, but also not unimportant Taiwanese barbecue traditions. I sincerely hope that the scholarly community will take stock of your work, which is not just insightful in terms of its empirical insights, but also innovative in terms of its approach and its long-term scope. I'm curious to see where you will end up, because you've already been exploring so much throughout the process. You've got a wide set of skills, strong dose of determination and entrepreneurship. So I don't worry about your future at all. I hope you don't do that either, because you shouldn't. So keep us posted and drop by from time to time. The door is always open. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. On this wonderful note, dear Dr. Lu sounds good, eh? Yes. Dr. Lu, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. Housekeeping note, we will now take a picture with the online opponents, and then we will take a picture on the stairs for the continuity of history. We will do that, and then we will have drinks all together and celebrate this wonderful achievement and day. Thank you. Oh, they're coming. Let's go. Perfect. Thank you so much. Front with the diploma. Is there someone with a camera? Otherwise, I have to take a picture myself. Is there someone with a camera? Phone? Ah. Now come in the front, please. Also the supervisors are here.
Yeah, but if you stand in the front, it's a bit.
A little bit more in the front. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, the paronyms more visible, please.